Mindfulness of the body allows us in due course to say, oh, this is what I've learned to do, right? I've learned to use this part of my face and underuse this other part of my face. This cranial nerve instead of that cranial nerve. And the Hope for Dystonia method is all about this, right? Empowering people with mindfulness. Hello and welcome to Hope for Dystonia. My name is Shmuel. Today, we are talking about something crucial and fundamental. We are talking about mindfulness and dystonia, and why mindfulness is such a crucial practice to cultivate for those of us who are on a healing journey from dystonia, or perhaps just more broadly, a journey of mind-body healing. So we'll do the following things in this video. Number one, we'll talk about what meditation is. We'll talk about what mindfulness is, and we'll talk about the 4 foundations of mindfulness and how they offer us a guide as to how we can train our attention to promote liberation, right? To promote healing and clear insight, and perhaps much more. So let's get right into it. So what is meditation? Meditation simply means we are focusing our attention on a specific object, and we are training our attention to stay with that specific object. So we are training our minds. Mindfulness is a specific kind of meditation. It is a kind of meditation that allows us, encourages us to focus on the present moment in a way that is non-judgmental and heart-centered. So what that means is that we welcome what comes up without saying, I want to feel this, I don't want to feel that, without kind of fragmenting our nervous systems in that way, and with a quality of warmth and care and compassion. And that is quite revolutionary, right? Because it allows us to go from being fused with our experience and being on the roller coaster of our emotions and our thoughts, kind of believing everything that we think and so on, going from that to what psychologists call decentering, right? The ability to take a step back and observe our experience from the heart and observe it with care, right? And so there is a quality of equanimity here, right? So we are observing our experience, but we're not getting involved into the stories, and we're not trying to control things. We're not trying to react to what we are observing. And there is a quality of compassion and care that says, I care about what's happening. I care about the part of me that is experiencing what it is experiencing. And mindfulness comes from the Buddhist tradition, even though different spiritual traditions have developed their own kinds of contemplative practices and their own ways of helping practitioners stay with their present moment experience, as opposed to drifting off to stories or to all the things that we want to grasp at and all the things that we want to push away. Different traditions have different ways of encouraging us to do that. But the Buddhist tradition really developed this beautifully. And the Buddha came up with several lists, right? Buddhists love lists. And one of the lists is the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So these are explained in a text that is called the Satipatthana Sutta in the Pali language. And I'm just giving you the Pali name for flavor, right? Because I think, it gives an idea that what we are talking about here is something that has a long tradition behind it. And it is something that has supported human flourishing for centuries. And we're not making this up. And these 4 foundations of mindfulness are a really incredibly insightful map of the human psyche and the path towards greater ease and presence and, who knows, liberation. And these 4 foundations are mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, right? So do I like something? Do I want to push it away? Am I craving it? Am I rejecting it? And mindfulness of mental formations, so our thoughts and, complex inner worlds, and mindfulness of the dhammas. So if we simplify this, the way things work, right? So mindfulness starts with mindfulness of the body. And in our context of dystonia healing, mindfulness of the body is key. We are often in a situation, if we have dystonia, where we have forgotten certain parts of the body and we have learned to overuse others. We have learned to inhabit certain parts of our bodies excessively and to completely disregard others. And this matters, right? Because it is a form of fragmentation of the nervous system that causes us illness, that causes us suffering. And a big part of dystonia healing is about coming back to the body and reconnecting to a sense of embodiment with greater precision, with greater presence, and in a way that feels safe, right? Without kind of rushing to feel things in the body too quickly. Because as we know, our issues live in our tissues, right? So our body carries the trauma that we have been through. So mindfulness of the body is an encouragement to understand, hey, beyond the stories of what I think is happening, of what I think I should be doing, of what I think is right and wrong, and what I should grasp at and what I should reject. What is true in my body right now, right? So when I'm in a social situation and I feel nervous, what happens if instead of saying, oh, I should be performing, I should be, showing up a certain way, I should be impressive, I should look cool. What happens if instead of doing that, I start asking with curiosity, hey, beyond the stories of the shoulds, what is actually happening in my body? What is my body trying to tell me right now? And we may discover that there are micro patterns of tension, of relaxation, places within the body that feel more grounded, that feel safer, and parts of the body that feel more agitated. And mindfulness of the body allows us to feel what is really true for our nervous systems beyond the stories that we have learned to tell ourselves in order to survive in our environments. And mindfulness of the body allows us in due course to say, oh, this is what I've learned to do, right? I've learned to use this part of my face and underuse this other part of my face. This cranial nerve instead of that cranial nerve. And the Hope for Dystonia method is all about this, right? Empowering people with mindfulness so that they can understand what their current patterns are, and so that they have options, right? And say, now that I know that I've forgotten this part and this other part has been stealing all of the electricity, I can intentionally choose to re-inhabit the part of me that I've forgotten and kind of see what happens from there. So, okay, that's mindfulness of the body. Then there's mindfulness of feelings, right? Of the feeling tones, really. So it is important for us to recognize that evolution has endowed us with a series of faculties and a series of kind of automatic behaviors that don't always serve us, right? So one of these is this drive towards survival that expresses itself into this constant self-referential processing of the world that is filtered through, is this good for me? Is this bad for me, right? Do I like this? Do I not like this? And this has its obvious evolutionary advantage because, it used to keep us away from danger and to keep us present with things that supported our survival. Yet, in our day and age, and especially if we are suffering from a neurological condition and we are on a path of mind-body healing, this constant mechanism of saying, I want this, I don't want that, this constant push and pull, yuck and yum, right, is not actually supportive. It's not actually helpful. Why? Because it obscures the way things really are, right? And so often we feel yuck, we feel aversion to emotions that are unpleasant, right? So we might feel aversion towards feeling our own fear or our own anxiety. And our culture encourages us to push those away, to medicate those away, to distract ourselves away from them. And you do you, right? But if you ask me, that is a missed opportunity. Because those unpleasant emotions are an opportunity to actually listen to the parts of us that have been hurting, right? And so there is a lot there, right? There is a whole universe within us that is asking to be taken care of. And the way it speaks to us is through emotions. It is through sensations in the body. And when we let go of this filter of, I only want to feel good things, right? I only want to look at things that feel good and so on. Once we allow ourselves to compassionately meet the parts of us that are hurting, then we have an opportunity to actually create change, right? And this too is at the heart of the Hope for Dystonia method. When we bring love to the parts of us that are hurting, the patterns of contraction and fear and hurt can begin to let go, right? Those chronic patterns of protection have less and less of a reason to be there. Okay, so that's one of the big gifts of letting go of the constant filter of yuck and yum, of attachment and aversion. So we come to awareness of thoughts, mindfulness of thoughts, and mental formations. And this is a big one because we really live in a society that encourages us to believe our thoughts, right? Our current global culture encourages us to fuse with our mental formations. And the way one of my teachers put it, our mind secretes thoughts the way our mouth secretes saliva, right? It's just what it does. And so I want to tell you a story that was also told to me by my teachers, two of my teachers, Tara Brock and Jack Cornfield. And they tell the story of a man who is snowed in. His house is buried under several meters of snow, or feet of snow, depending on where you are. And he can't find his tools, right? And I am blanking on the English word for the tool, but you'll forgive me. I'm just coming up with the French word pelle, but I'll put the word in the subtitles. And so the man thinks, well, I should go and ask my neighbor for his snow removal equipment, right? And so the neighbor is, a few steps away. It takes a few minutes to get there. And the guy remembers that, this neighbor and we had a few disagreements in the past, and, he was unpleasant that one time, and that other time I said hello, and he didn't say hello back. And, he's probably not going to want to give me his equipment, and he's not going to want to share. I'm sure he's the kind of person who's just really stingy with his stuff. And so the whole way to the neighbor, he's deep in his thoughts, right? And he's creating a whole castle of ideas and a whole assessment of what he thinks will happen once he asks his neighbor to share his snow removal equipment. And so he gets to the neighbor's door, he knocks, the neighbor opens the door, and the guy says, "You can keep your damn equipment," and walks back, right? So this is a funny story, at least I find it funny, but this is something that we do all the time, right? And we need to recognize that our brains are prediction machines, right? So we construct a certain picture of the world based on our prior experiences. And our thoughts are shaped by certain habits and certain filters and experiences that we've had in the past and so on. And our thoughts are just that. They are these representations, right? And we don't have to believe them, right? They are constructed elements that are a reflection of everything that went into producing them in the first place, right? So when we have mindfulness of thoughts, we are able to respond to life rather than react, right? We are able to really offer the best of ourselves rather than go on autopilot, right? Because we don't default to those automatic habits and automatic assessments and automatic ways of being who we are, right? And this is particularly helpful with dystonia because with dystonia, we really are caught in certain automatic loops, right? And sometimes these loops come with explicit word thoughts. Sometimes we have sensation thoughts or image thoughts or other kinds of thoughts that get triggered automatically in the presence of a certain task or a certain activity. And so, think of a musician who has placed dozens of hours weekly into playing a certain instrument and lots of emotional capital, and her own self-esteem is tied up into how well she plays her instrument. And the minute she approaches the instrument, a whole cascade of implicit ways of being and thoughts and mechanisms in the body and so on, all of that gets activated. And being able to say, oh, wow, I am thinking that I must perform to perfection or else, but that is a story that I've learned to tell myself. It is not necessarily a true reflection of reality, right? Reality is a lot more open and malleable than I would imagine. And so mindfulness of thoughts is something that allows us to undo the whole cascade, right? And I won't say as much about mindfulness of the Dhammas because, it's kind of like a higher level mindfulness of how things work, right? But I will perhaps just share this, right? I mentioned earlier that these thoughts and these ways of being are constructed, right? What does that mean? It means that they're not solid things that are immutable, that will never change, that have some sort of power over us. All of these ways of being, the dystonia itself, the spasms and so on, these are things that we have learned to do because of all kinds of things that we were exposed to. We have constructed a certain way of being who we are that made sense at the time, right? Given the trouble that we were exposed to. And one of the items of awareness, one of the things that we can be mindful of when it comes to mindfulness of the Dhammas is that all of this is constructed, right? And just as we constructed a certain way of being, we can construct a new one, right? So I hope this made sense so far. Mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of thoughts and mental formations, and mindfulness of the Dhammas. This is a map for how to relate to our own experience. And it is a map that can really profoundly support us in our work towards liberation. It is important as well to note that we won't always have access to all 4 items on this list, right? So sometimes it is not accessible to me that, what I am doing is something that is constructed and there are different ways of being that I can engage and so on. All I can do, if I'm really activated, is focus on the body and find something in the body that feels more grounding, that feels more soothing. And so I start with that, right? I start with mindfulness of the body. And that can help me orient myself in that experience. And we can progress on the list as we cultivate our capacity and our regulation. All right, I hope all of this resonated. I hope this inspires you to bring mindfulness into your life. And thank you for watching. If you haven't yet downloaded the 8 steps of the Hope for Dystonia Recovery Roadmap, I highly recommend that you click on the link in the description below. It is invaluable information, an invaluable map that can help you begin to make sense of dystonia and begin to find a way back to yourself. Much love, and see you in the next one.